So, check this out, people. Today I want to talk about something that most men don't talk about, and that's other men. And I want to talk specifically about fathers. Why most men who are fathers tend to abandon their children. That's not just a common theme in America, it's a common theme worldwide. For some reason, it happens with animals, it happens with humans. It's always the mother who ends up alone with the children. But unlike animals, we weren't created to be away from our children, to be away from our family. And so, when a man marries a woman, or when a man gets his girlfriend pregnant, his wife pregnant, most of the time, he doesn't go with her to see the doctor, to her prenatal care. He isn't involved in her pregnancy. For some reason, most men tend to let the woman go through the pregnancy alone. They feel as if though that's not a manly thing. It's not masculine. And the fact is that a man doesn't have to impress his boys. He doesn't have to impress his employer. He doesn't have to impress his family. The only one he has to impress is his wife. The only one that he has to impress is the woman who he's got pregnant. And so, when a man doesn't participate in a woman's prenatal care, he doesn't go with her to the sonogram, he doesn't go with her to her regular checkups, and it isn't involved, and he doesn't participate, especially in the pregnancy, he isn't going to become attached to the baby because he's never been a part of the woman's pregnancy. He isn't going to become instantly attached to that child. And contrary to what most people believe, I have 4 children of my own, 4 daughters who I raised and have always been involved in their lives. When your children are born, you don't fall in love with them. You're not in love with your children. It doesn't come that way for a man. I don't care what anybody says. You love your children because they're your children, obviously. But you grow to love your children because you're involved in their life. But if you're a father and you have children who you've never been involved in their life, you're not going to care about them. I don't care what anybody says. I don't care what any man says who's never been involved in their children's lives, who claims he loves his children. Because if he loved his children, he'd be there. And so, the reason why most men aren't in their children's lives, and it's so easy for them to leave their wives, leave their girlfriends, years or months after the baby's been born, is because he's never been involved and has no understanding of what it is a woman goes through in order to pass another human being through her body. Now, the only way a man is going to understand and appreciate his children is when he sees what a woman goes through in order to pass that child. He has to be there. He has to see it. He has to feel it. And the only way he's going to feel it is when he's standing by his wife's side, by his girlfriend's side, while she's pushing that human being out of her body. That's the only way. With my ex-wife at the time, we were married very young. She was 17, I was 19. Her father had to sign for her in order for us to get married. And just like a lot of young people, we made the mistake and she got pregnant. And so I did the right thing and we got married. She was an incredible woman and an incredible wife. And through no fault of her own, we ended up separated because I was crazy. And when a man is crazy, he doesn't know he's crazy. Because when you instruct a child in his ways, when he is older, he will not depart. And so we have to teach our children so that when they grow up, they know how to honor and respect their wives. And so one thing that I learned, and one, if not the only reason why I learned to love my children and appreciate them, is because when my wife gave birth to our first baby, my oldest daughter, I was with her throughout. Of course, we were married. She stayed at home. I worked a full-time job. She never had to work while we were together. Things have changed. It's no longer that way. Women want to be men, and men want to be bitches. And so the women work today while the man stays home playing video games. But anyway, at that time, my wife was at home. I was at work. The baby was due. We lived in the Bronx. And so we drove to Manhattan, to Mount Sinai Hospital, where we wanted her to give birth at a good hospital, as opposed to Lincoln Hospital, which is the hospital in the Bronx which was nearer to us. But Lincoln Hospital has always had a bad reputation, so we didn't want to have the baby there. And so we drove to Mount Sinai in Manhattan. And when we got there, they prepped her. She was already having labor pains while we were on our way. We took a cab there. And so they prepped her. Immediately she was ready to give birth. Within a few minutes, the water bag broke, or they broke it for her. I'm not exactly sure. And it was one of the worst experiences I had ever seen. And I'm from the Bronx, New York, and I was raised in New York in the late 70s, early 80s, and I've experienced a lot of horrors during that time. But the pain and the suffering that I witnessed by my wife could not be compared to anything that I had experienced or seen growing up as a child in the Bronx, New York. She must have been given birth for about 45 minutes, maybe an hour and 15 minutes. It was really hard for her to push the baby out. She was so exhausted. The doctors kept trying to help. I was in the room. I was holding her. I was encouraging her. And no matter how much she pushed and pushed and pushed, at that time, during those times, they didn't always give painkillers to people as easily as they do today. Most women who give birth today, they immediately request painkillers. They immediately give them painkillers. I wish at the time that I had allowed or asked the doctors to give her painkillers, but I'm sure at the time, because of the situation, it had been too late for them to give her painkillers in order for her to go through this pregnancy or this delivery a lot easier than what she went through. And so while she was pushing for 5 minutes, turned to 10 minutes, turned to 15 minutes, 20 minutes, no matter what they did, what we did, how we encouraged her, how much she cried, how much she pushed, she finally began to pass out from exhaustion. And so once she couldn't push anymore, once all of her energy was drained out of her, the doctors dragged her, picked her up onto a gurney and put her onto another bed with some stirrups, where they then put her legs up in a position where she was able to basically be on her back with her legs up, resting on these stirrups, in order to make it easier for the doctors to help deliver the baby. And she was almost unconscious at that time. The doctors had to get the baby out as fast as possible because of the oxygen that she was losing from being right there, but not out. And so while my wife was still semi-conscious, the doctor grabbed some scissors and simply went in while she was still semi-conscious with no sedatives, no numbing, and cut her in 2 places while she was still awake, and cut once and cut twice. And once they did the first cut, she woke up from the pain, of course, and she was more in shock than in pain, because she didn't scream, but you could see the pain in her eyes. And then the doctor placed these, I don't know what you call them, they look like tongs, and they put one tongue in from one side, and she's still awake, and the other one in, and then put some pressure to grab my daughter by the head and pull. And once the baby's head came out, they were able to maneuver her out completely and get her out. Once the baby was out, my wife became unconscious. She pretty much just passed out from exhaustion. I've never seen a person suffer so much in my life. I had no idea what it is a woman goes through in order to pass another human being through their body, from their body. And the only way a man is going to appreciate his wife, his girlfriend, his children, is if he's standing by his wife to see the experience that she has to go through in order to bring his children into this world. And this is why most men have no regard for their wives, for their girlfriends, the mother of their children, because they have no idea the torture, the pain, the anguish that these women put their bodies through, put their minds through, put themselves through in order to give birth to another human being. That was the worst experience of my life. I could only imagine what it was like for her. As soon as my daughter was born, I didn't stand there to wait. They wrapped her up, they put her in, I don't know, some type of, it wasn't an incubator, but just some warming place where they keep her warm until they prep my wife, and someone would come in and take the baby, and after they tag her to make sure that everything is done properly. After that was done, which took about 5 minutes, I simply walked out of that room with my head down. And as I was walking out of the room, I could hear screams from other women who were giving birth. All I wanted to do was leave to get out of that hospital. I hit the button to the elevator as many times as I could. I just wanted to leave. Once the elevator doors opened and I got onto that elevator, I cried. I wept. I didn't just cry, I wept. I've never seen a person suffer so much in my life. And this is why I love my children. This is why I fell in love with my daughter the very first day she was delivered. I didn't have to wait to build that love. I didn't have to wait to build that affection, because I was there and I witnessed the pain that my wife went through to pass that child from her body. And this is the reason why most men leave their wives, their girlfriends, have no regard for their own children. They're not involved in their own children's lives. They claim to love their children, but don't pay child support, don't take care of their kids, don't visit their kids. They can easily leave, get another woman pregnant, move on to the next one. The next one have 5 or 6 different kids from 5 or 6 different women and could care less. But if a man stands by his girl and by his wife and allows himself to be a man and witnesses the pain that a woman goes through, he will never leave her side. He will never leave his children's side, no matter what happens. No matter how good things get, no matter how bad things get. He will always love his children. He will always love his wife. He will always love his girlfriend. Always. No matter who comes into his life later on, he will always put that woman first. Because she is the mother of his children, his blood. And she passed those children through and from her body. And so, to these men who are out there, the reason why they don't love their kids, the reason why they don't appreciate their kids, even though they might say, oh yeah, I love my kids, I send them gifts every year for their birthday, that's not love. I do that for children who aren't mine. I feed kids who aren't mine all the time, especially here in the Philippines. They're not my kids. I don't love them the way I love my kids. But when I see a child who's hungry, it's easy for me to understand that, because I see my children. I see a woman who gave birth to that child and went through pain. Pain that a man could never experience or understand. And so when I look at a child, I see my wife giving birth. I see that image in my head, and that pain and that suffering that a woman can only experience and a man could never experience and not even imagine. And so for you young men who may be watching this video or who may come across this video, if you don't have a wife, if you don't have a girlfriend, if you do have a girlfriend, if you do have a wife or plan to, but don't have children, if you ever marry and your wife gets pregnant, or if you have a girlfriend and your girlfriend gets pregnant, spend and share that time with her as much as you can. Share that time with her. And when the time comes for her to give birth, if you're at work, leave your job. If you're with your boys, leave your boys. No matter what it is you're doing, stop. Stand by your wife. Stand by your girlfriend. Be there and witness the pain and suffering that this woman goes through. And you will love that child from the very first day you see its face. You won't have to grow to love that child. You won't have to wait to fall in love with it because you just met him 3 days later from the time he was born or she was born, and your wife or girlfriend brought the baby home to you from the hospital. Or you showed up after the baby was born and saw this new being that your wife is holding, who is your baby, but you have no attachment to it because you weren't there to see the pain that she goes through. So my advice to you, if you want to love your wife unconditionally, your girlfriend, your children, and know what it means to have good things because you stand by your children, and only a man who stands by his children can understand the things that I'm saying, because a man that stands by his children will never lack anything, because his children are the driving force that pushes him to do better, to be better, to have more. Not for him, but for his children, his family. And when a man pushes himself for his family, it only makes him stronger, it only makes him better, and it only makes him richer, because he works for his family, and in turn, he works for himself. And that makes him a better man. And so, to these men who are out there, love your wives, love your girlfriends, respect your children's mother, honor her, love her, and understand that giving birth to a child is not something as easy as watching TV and watching it in the movies or on TV, all the drama and all the nonsense. You want to see a woman suffer? Go watch your wife or girlfriend give birth. And then you will appreciate her for the woman that she is. And every day that you come home from work, you will come home to her. You won't want to come home to another woman, because you've watched her suffer for you. You've watched her suffer to give birth to your children, your seed, the ones who are going to pass your legacy down to the next generation. This isn't something that can be taught. You can't teach a man to love his children. You can't teach a man to love his wife or his girlfriend. That is something that has to come naturally. Those types of feelings are sparked by certain situations that happen in life. When you go through bad things in life with your girlfriend, your wife, it makes you stronger. It brings you together, because the hard times prepare you for the better times. And those better times become better still. The hard times pass and the good times get better. And each time things get hard, you know you can get past that because you got passed through the first stage. Like giving birth. You watch your wife give birth. You watch the pain she went through. You watch the outcome. Your seed, your child, your baby, your son, your daughter, who you now love because you stood there and watched your wife, your girlfriend give birth to this child. and you appreciate it, and you appreciate her and your child. And so this is why most men don't understand a woman when a woman wants more from her husband, her boyfriend, who they have a child together or children together. The man would rather be out with his friends. He's always saying, oh, you tend to the baby, that's your job. Because you can't appreciate the pain she went through to give birth to this child. I was always involved with my wife and my children, always, and to my wife's detriment, because I was obsessed with my kids, especially with my first daughter. I wasn't always right. I didn't always do the right thing. I didn't always say things right. I was overly cautious. I was overly careful. And I was just, the experience that I had, went through watching my wife go through what she went through giving birth to my daughter, broke me. If I was strong, if I was hard, that made me softer. That made me a lot easier. And as hard as I was, because trust me, if my wife could tell you, I was not soft. But if I had not witnessed her give birth to my daughter the first time, I would have been even harder. That made me soft. That made me realize that I need to make her life as easy as possible. And so if you want to appreciate your children, men, and if you don't want to be like these bums who abandon their children because they have no understanding of what it is a woman goes through, my advice to you, you want to have good things, you want to be a better man, stand by your wife, stand by your girlfriend while she's giving birth. Before she gives birth, stand with her and be there by her side when she gives birth to that child, and you will see her in a different light. You won't cheat on her. You think twice before you do. You make sure that you come home to her and only her. You forget about your boys, your friends, because those things won't matter to you as much as your wife, your girlfriend, your daughter, your son, because you know what that's like. And you wouldn't wish that type of pain on anybody. And so that was the birth of my first daughter. My second daughter, thank God, was a very smooth birth. Within 10 minutes, she was out. And my third daughter was a cesarean. And so it simply got easier as time went by. I became a lot more sensitive because of my daughters, because I was standing by my wife each time she gave birth. And so this is my advice to you guys. Honor your wives, honor your girlfriends, treasure them, appreciate them, be there, and see this for yourself so you can see what it is a woman puts herself through just to give birth to your seed, the next generation who is going to keep your soul, your spirit alive once you're dead and once you're no longer here.